All right, blessings, everyone. Okay. Again, you know what's happening here in Canada. I'm sure you've heard about it. And there's some things that I just cannot say. And I'm going to be showing a few clips, but I'm going to be trying to be very careful because it's going to be about my testimony. It's about my vision and now walking in that vision and now understanding what that vision meant. And not so much just as, because when I received that vision, all I saw was the destruction, and that was it. I had no understanding but what it was that I was looking at. I was 12 years old at the time, never stepping foot out of Toronto. So I had no idea what I was looking at other than to say there was destruction. So I'm going to be staying within my vision and walking you through it the way I see it, what's being shown to me in understanding of the vision. This vision came from Jesus, who whispered in my ear, "Do you know that you have a Father in heaven?" When he told me this, I knew in the knowing, instinctively, instantly, that he was closer to me than my Father here. And I say this because I had no Bible. There was no religion in my family. Wasn't raised with religion. The only reason why I knew of anything was through movies. And my mother always played every year the 10 Commandments. So this is where I was getting everything from. I never picked the Bible up until I was 50 years old. Okay, so in my vision, I see this. Okay, so now, so here I'm just standing, just right. This is the view that I see in my vision. Okay, and I see a dome over the city, and it's all on fire. And then it stops abruptly, and the next thing I know, I'm in water. I'm immersed in water. It's dark, and I've got metal all around me. And then it stops. I'm on land, and I'm looking at the bridge, and I'm seeing a cable cord swinging back and forth over the water. So this is exactly what I see in my vision. I'm standing here. There's water between the two lands. I see a city on fire. Then I'm in water, full of metal, all around me. I'm back on land, and I see this bridge. And there's a cable cord again going back and forth over the water. And the only thing I remember after this was just that I wanted to jump on that cable cord and get over to the other side to help the people. And then it ends. So, of course, many years later, I'm here. I'm at the river. I'm at the Detroit River. And I'm standing there and I look at this. And immediately, this is my vision. I'm right where I'm supposed to be, is the first thing that comes to me. I'm right where I'm supposed to be. But I never understood it completely of what it was that I was looking at in the vision other than the destruction. But that was it. No understanding of it. Okay, so and just right in here, I just want to say that the tunnel okay, is right in here, just behind the trees. It's right in front of the Renaissance building in Detroit. Okay, this is Detroit, and the tunnel's right there in this area here, and then you can see the bridge. Okay, so I also just want to say here that I am looking from east to west, and I think this is important. I'm not sure if I said that. I apologize if I had, but wasn't sure. Okay. So then Jonathan Kleck comes out with this. Okay. And I never really paid attention to it. I mean, it was more of a glance than anything else, not really looking at it until Jonathan Kleck started to point things out, and he started to explain, his interpretation of what it was that he was looking at. But I'm just going to say from right now that this, when I first saw this, and after he had talked about it, like I said, when I first saw it, I'm like, okay, that looks awfully familiar. It looks like the river, but didn't think anything of it. And then he started talking about other things, and this is probably why I didn't, look into this, but he started talking about certain things. Right? Now remember, in my vision, it's the cable cord that's swinging back and forth the river, right? Well, what I'm doing now is I'm looking, and it's Google who does the picture here. I'm looking at my vision, but I'm looking at it from west to east. So now I'm looking at it from the bridge, and you cannot see where I was standing. Now, just real quickly here, this side here is Windsor, Detroit. Detroit buildings are black. That's the Renaissance buildings. Windsor, the casino, is white. This is Canadian side. Okay, this would be the Ambassador Bridge. Now, I looked at it for the first time again, and I'm seeing that there's water right here. See the water here? And it's almost like you can see the reflection here of this here. Okay, here's the reflection. So it gives you, that the water is just below the bridge. Okay. So this would be the breach. I believe something happened because of the tunnel. Okay. And there being that there was a breach, this is what happened with the water. Something happens with the water. Okay. So again, this is what I see, and it's Google doing it. This has nothing to do with Jonathan Kleck's talent there. And so I start to listen to what Jonathan Kleck is saying. Okay, so I'm looking at this, and it's just the flip side of my vision, where I was looking from east to west, and here it's west to east, and the water again, it's kind of breached right here. All right, again, this is Windsor Casino, the white building. Okay, and the Renaissance building. Okay, so I'm just going to play out what Jonathan is saying and what it is that he sees in this picture from Google.
No different than it represents the female and male and male. The male pronucleus. This represents the garden, where it's the seed of the serpent and then the seed of Adam. So you have two different seeds with Eve. That's what this circle represents. Now, if you're paying attention, you'll see the horizon, right? You see the horizon? Now, the horizon right here, if you look very closely, you'll see the pyramid right here with its reflection.
I don't see it.
You'll see the sunrise. Don't forget, it's 2020. This year is 2020. Right here, okay, let me show you something like Twin Cities. You see the city over here? You see this building with the angle right here? Look over here. It's the same thing, but it's dark. One's dark, one's light. Here's the sunrise coming up, just like the Statue of Liberty. The two-in-one system represented by this head right here of this that's watching the sunrise. That's the system. The two-in-one. That's the seed of the serpent. That's Adam impregnating Eve. Now watch. You see right here? This is supposed to be the horizon. Wrong. That is a palisade. That is a hypodermic needle. And this sailboat that's allegedly right here on the water, that is the stake going through it into the system. And right over here is, you can pick the tip of the spear or the sword. I would go with sword.
Okay, so I just want to point out that when he says palisade, okay, palisade is military form of defense. It's a fence that is embedded into the ground and then it has a pointy top, okay? So that would be palisade. So I'm going to show you something here that I found. Okay, here, palisade, a mount of besieging. A palisade mount for besieging. Besieging, are you right? And so what happened here at the bridge? Right? It says the geography of a palisade, a line of high cliffs, especially of basalt, usually along a river. I mean, really? Okay, so again, it's a fenced, it's about defense, it's a barricade, okay, this sort of thing. That's a palisade. Okay. What happened here? You know, at the Ambassador Bridge, the Detroit Bridge. What happened? It was closed off. Right? By the truckers on the Canadian side. You see, and that would make sense to me because here you could see that the bridge is completely gone. And in my vision, it wasn't like this at all. It was a cord, you know, and it was going back and forth over. So it wasn't so much of the damage to the bridge, but there was a breach. There was something wrong with the bridge. And this tells me that this was the closing of the bridge when the truckers closed it down. And they didn't close it down completely, right? I want to make sure that I say that, all right? So here we have the palisade. This is what Jonathan Kleck is talking about. And this is what is happening here in Canada today. And I'm sure you've heard about the closing of the Ambassador Bridge, the Detroit and Windsor Bridge. Again, border cities. So, okay. So the palisade, it's all coming together. I'm starting to understand it. It's, you know, I'm starting to awaken to the understanding of this vision that, you know, Jesus had given to me at the age of 12. Okay, so the palisade, this man is talking about the palisade, which means a besieging. Okay, this would be military. And it's a fence. It's either to keep something out or keep something in or somebody in. Okay. So then there was the sailboat, okay? So here, again, I'm looking at this, and now I'm already looking into the Black Plague, okay, many years ago. So I'm looking into this, and I find, again, a video of Jonathan Kleck, who's talking about the Black Plague. So Jonathan Kleck comes out with this video showing this flag here. And this would be a sign for the other ships to know that there was a plague on the ship, the Black Plague. Okay, this was a warning to them. Okay, all right. So Jonathan is talking about this. Okay, so we know that this is a ship. Again, they use Asian here. Okay, on the waters. All right, so you know it's a ship. Okay. So then he's talking about the Black Plague. Okay, so here, this is Britannica, so you know it's legit, or you should feel comfortable with this. Okay, so 1940 or 1347, the Black Death moves from China. So the ground zero is China for the Black Death. No different than the CCP virus. Again, ground zero, China. So here, what happens? The Black Death moves from China, Central Asia to Europe when an army led by a mongrel ruler, Jambing, attacks the Genosis trading post of Kaffa in Crimea. As infected soldiers die from the disease, he catapults their plague-infested bodies into the town to infect his enemies. From Kaffa, the Genosis ship carried the epidemic westward to the Mediterranean ports, quickly spreading the disease inland. Huh. Interesting, right? Okay. So the Black Plague and the CCP virus all come from China, right? That would be ground zero. This is what it says here, right? Okay. Okay. All right. So we have, it could be a sword, but I believe it could be also a UFO, or it could be a spear, a tip of a sword, a spear. But again, it could be of the three things. So we're letting that go. So here we have this, this sailboat or this boat. Again, we're talking about the Black Plague. We're talking about the CCP virus. We're talking about, okay, so again, now he's talking about in the horizon, right? He sees this pyramid. Okay, so don't forget this again. So he said he's seen a pyramid. So for myself, I thought, well, you know what? One day I was driving and I thought, I'm going to go right to the very end and see what it is that he was talking about, go to the end of the road kind of thing. And so I did. And boy, I was very surprised, but yet there was confirmation at the same time. Okay, so here, what do I see but this dragon? This is a dragon that you see when you're coming into the Detroit River. This is going to be what you see first. Okay, so here we have the dragon. We have the circle here, the black circle. What doesn't matter what color, I don't think. But here we have a circle. The dragon is in it. And I was looking for a plaque to read about this, but I couldn't find anything. So I went over here and it says Dragon Boat, and it says The Cure. Okay, the Dragon Boat, The Cure, but you can't really read it so much, it's too blurry. Okay, the cure for what? Dragon, the Dragon Boat. Interesting. The cure. So this would be his pyramid. This is when he was saying he saw a pyramid. When I went down, this is what I saw. The Dragon Boat Cure. It says International Dragon Boat for the Cure. And we know drugs and the pharmacist, that's sorcery, right?
How many people were allowed into Canada from Hubei province after this government received intelligence showing the danger of the coronavirus from our military?
The Honorable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we became aware that the coronavirus was indeed a threat and that there were a number of places around the world where we were receiving people who could be have the contagion of the coronavirus. That is why at the border we were very clear about giving clear instructions about the need for self-isolation.
The honourable member for Carleton.
After the government received intelligence from our military about the dangers of the coronavirus in China, it allowed 2,000 people from the Hubei province, the most affected province, to come into Canada. Were these 2,000 people quarantined? Yes or no?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I hope the member opposite knows, quarantine is a very specific legal term, and the measures of quarantine are currently in place. Prior to that obligatory quarantine being in place, incoming travelers, whether they were Canadian or not, were very clearly told to self-isolate.
The Honourable member for Carleton.
Told to self-isolate but not required to self-isolate, and therefore this government allowed thousands of people into this country who came from the affected regions, even though there were briefings the government had explaining the danger of doing just that.
Media asked his health minister and his chief medical officer for evidence supporting the decision. Neither had any, and in fact, the medical officer said it was time to return to normalcy. So yet, the Prime Minister, in spite of all of these facts, brought in this new mandate to deprive people of their living. Why? Because he knew that it would spark in them a sense of desperation. If he could deprive them of their incomes, they would be so desperate that they would have to rise up and protest. And then he could further demonize them and call them names and attack their motives and belittle them and dehumanize them in order to galvanize the majority against the minority. This must be the political opportunity that his deputy Prime Minister spoke about when she described what COVID represented to this government. They have attempted to amplify and take advantage of every pain, every fear, every tragedy that has struck throughout this pandemic in order to divide one person against another and replace the people's freedom with the government's power. Now, at the beginning of the pandemic, it started immediately. The government attempted to ram through a law giving it the power to raise any tax to any level for any reason without a vote in Parliament. They tried to pass Bill C-10 to strip away free speech online. Thankfully, Conservatives blocked them for doing so. His authorities have said they want to track Canadian cell phones for the next 5 years. And now this, the Emergency Act, the latest and greatest example of attacks on our freedom. Ostensibly meant to stop blockades that had already ended before he even brought forward this legislation in Alberta, Manitoba, and at the Ambassador Bridge. Peacefully, those blockades were ended in some cases with protesters hugging the police officers and bringing the matters to a successful close so that goods and services could resume. And instead, in that context, the Prime Minister brought in a law that not even Jean Chrétien brought in after 9/11 killed dozens of Canadians in a terrorist attack. Not even Prime Minister Harper brought in when a terrorist murdered a Canadian soldier at the War Monument and came running into the center block spraying bullets in all directions. And not even this Prime Minister brought in when blockaders were standing in the way of First Nations who were attempting to build the Coastal GasLink pipeline. Yet, for the first time in this law's 3-decade history, the Prime Minister brings it in to address what he says was a protest in front of Parliament Hill. Ironically, this power goes beyond any of the protests and or blockades the Prime Minister claims to want to address. For example, it will allow governments and banks to seize people's bank accounts and money for donating to the wrong political cause. One journalist asked the Justice Minister if small sums donated, for example, to support an end to vaccine mandates, could get someone's bank account frozen. He didn't deny it. Instead, he said such people who make donations of that kind should be, quote, very worried. To freeze someone's bank account is not just an attack on their finances, but on their personal security. If your bank account is frozen, you can't buy food, you can't buy fuel, you can't pay your children's daycare fees, and you can, under this law, face that personal attack without being charged with a single solitary crime. The Prime
This week, the federal government invoked the Emergencies Act, an extreme law that has never been used, and it announced 2 emergency orders that will have sweeping consequences on individuals, orders that it passed outside of ordinary democratic processes. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association has spoken out loudly against this declaration, and today we have our own announcement. We are taking the Government of Canada to court. We are here today because of the government's response to the protests and blockades. The government's emergency declaration is unprecedented and seriously infringes the charter rights of Canadians. The government has brought in an extreme measure that should be reserved for national emergencies, a legal standard that has not been met. Emergency powers cannot and must not be normalized. For all the peaceful and disruptive protests, a legal standard that has not been met. Emergency powers cannot and must not be normalized. Powers cannot and must not be normalized. For all the peaceful and disruptive protests in Canada's history, some involving unlawful acts and protracted standoffs with police, never before has a government declared a national emergency under the Emergencies Act, and with that given itself the enormous powers to bypass the ordinary, accountable democratic process. Our commitment to equality and other rights is the reason that we strongly support the charter right to peaceful assembly. This is how marginalized people can stand up for their rights. Protest is how people in a democracy express and share their political messages of all kinds, whether they be environmental activists, students taking to the streets, Indigenous land defenders, workers on strike, people who know that Black Lives Matter, and others who oppose government measures of all kinds. Our society needs peaceful assembly, a critical democratic tool. And even though not every person may agree with the content of every movement, many protests are disruptive. It is possible for a gathering to be both disruptive and peaceful and non-violent. Disruptive protest, while often unlawful, like shutting down pipelines or camping out in a public space, can be the most effective way of raising awareness. And at protests, many different kinds of people might end up in the same space, joined by a common cause. The fact that some of the protesters may break laws, act aggressively or oppressively, does not necessarily mean that other protesters share their extremist views or conduct. Let me be clear. We are deeply concerned by the reports that some of the protesters currently in the streets have engaged in violent, racist, and homophobic acts. We hear and recognize the impacts these acts are having on marginalized communities. We stand with these communities. We condemn this behavior. We also recognize that the recent protests are having a considerable and difficult impact on the lives of those who live and work in their vicinity. We recognize that people in Ottawa have been profoundly and negatively affected. But again, we are here today because of the government's response to these protests and blockades. The right to protest and peaceful assembly is not a free-for-all. Reasonable limits can and sometimes must be imposed. We have no issue with this. But when imposing reasonable limits, police can and must exercise restraint, as must government. Police must avoid escalation. We have fought many times against police shutting down protests using excessive force, detentions and arrests, in particular against Indigenous, racialized, and other marginalized protesters. I'd like to now turn it over to my colleague, Abby Deschman, who's the director of the Criminal Justice Program.
The Canadian Civil Liberties Association has retained counsel to launch a judicial review challenging the government's invocation of the Federal Emergencies Act. The Act gives the executive branch of the government extraordinary powers, and the legal threshold to use these extraordinary powers is intentionally high. Ensuring this threshold is met is a critical protection for the democratic process, the rule of law, and the civil liberties of individuals that may be impacted by these emergency orders. In our view, the threshold set out in the Emergencies Act, the legal requirements put in place to safeguard our democratic processes have not been met. Section 3 of the Emergencies Act requires that there be a national emergency, a temporary, urgent, and critical situation that seriously endangers the lives, health, or safety of Canadians and is of such proportions or nature that it exceeds the capacity or authority of a province to deal with it. It also encompasses serious situations that seriously threaten the ability of the Government of Canada to preserve the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of the country. In either case, the emergency must be such that it cannot be effectively dealt with under any other Canadian law. We do not want to minimize the impacts that the protests are having on people across the country. But while some of the blockades have been immensely disruptive, it is unclear that the ongoing protests endanger the lives, health, or safety of Canadians so seriously that they constitute a national emergency. It is also far from clear that our existing laws and police powers are ineffective in confronting this challenge. Police deal with extremely complex, difficult law enforcement situations every day. Local police across this country have cleared several highly disruptive border blockades and are successfully managing numerous other protests in communities across the country, all without emergency powers. There are some localized situations that have proven much more difficult to police, but the emergency orders that the government has passed are not targeted. They are not limited to specific protests or to specific geographic locations. They are expansive emergency orders that apply equally across the entire country, and they place unprecedented restrictions on every single Canadian's constitutional rights. In other words, they apply to everyone, you, me, everyone. These emergency orders currently in force place severe limits on peaceful protest. Police have now been given the authority across the country to shut down a wide range of peaceful protests if they're snarling traffic or blocking sidewalks. Protests that take place close to bus stations, hospitals, or COVID-19 vaccination sites are specifically restricted, even if they aren't disrupting traffic. The order also requires financial institutions to turn over the personal financial details to CSIS and the RCMP, and to freeze the bank accounts and cut off all financial services of people who have attended or have provided assistance to those participating in a prohibited assembly. Again, these orders are not limited to Ottawa. They don't apply only at the border. They are not specifically targeting trucker convoys. These orders limit the rights of every single Canadian, with a particular focus on people who participate in, travel to, or assist with the protest, no matter where it takes place, no matter the issue.
Now, I have to show you this. This is something, again, this is new for me. I'm just coming across all of this, and this was something I did a little while back, and I cannot remember why I had this or why I took the picture or saved it. Okay, and I believe this is in my archives, and I just found it. And again, what are we talking about? We're talking about the palisade. The palisade is military. It's a fort. It's what's to keep something out or keep something in, right? And here we have I believe this is basketball. Okay, and this would be, his name is Curry. This is his number right here, 30. And it's also, I believe this is 30 in Chinese here. But there's so many things going on within this thing, and in the shape, in the circle that it's in, and then you can see there is like, it looks like it's a virus or something around it, within it. You got the Chinese number here, 30. You've got the bridge, right? It's crazy. Okay, so watch this. Right? Chinese, heritage, the bay. Right? Now I guess that would be waters right here, I guess. This would be water, or anything that you would like, Jonathan Kleck would call it something else. you know. But again, common sense. So, and then there was this. Warriors versus raptors. And here we go again with the bridge. And with the claw. The reptilian. Okay, 30 city edition is what it says here. Okay. I forgot to show you this also because again we're talking about the palisade, and again I don't think it belonged where you know, it's almost like it was so hidden, the meaning of what he was talking about this picture that Google put up. Okay, and the only reason for me for being so interested in it was because I actually saw my vision, but looking it from the other side of it, looking from the bridge down. So I recognized it right away. So a palisade here, and it says a sign. It says short definition, sculpture, a stamp, sign, definition, engraving, a stamp, sign, sculpture. Okay, and then over here it says, you can see that. Okay, a stamp, an imprint mark of the mark stamped on the forehead or on the right hand as the badge of the followers of Antichrist. Revelations 13:6, Revelations 14:9-11, Revelations 15:2. The mark branded upon horses and so on. So yes, again, this is what he was alluring to also, and a lot of people were saying that this is what they believed, you know, it was just not. So again, this is palisade. Palisade. Okay. So we're just going to leave it with that. I mean, you can go on and look into what this palisade, okay, but I want to show you something that I thought was quite interesting because it really did look like a palisade, and it was supernatural, you know. Okay, so well, alrighty. Again, I didn't read this here. It says a palisade or a rampart of pales between which earth, stone, trees, and timbers are heaped and packed together. Again, you know, this is, there's, yeah, it's just, okay. They encourage themselves in an evil manner. They commune of laying snares, privily, secret. They say, who shall see it? Who shall see them? They search out iniquities. They accomplish a diligent search, both inward thoughts of every one of them, and the heart is deep. For their power is in their mouth and in their tails. For their tails were like unto serpents, and had heads, and with them they do hurt. And the rest of the men, which were not killed by the plagues, yet repented not of the works of their hands, that they shall not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone and of wood, which neither can see, nor hear, nor walk. Neither repented they of their murderers, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts. Revelation 9:19-21. And he said, Hearken ye, all Judah, and ye inhabitants of Jerusalem, and thou King Jehoshaphat, thou saith the Lord unto you, Be not afraid nor dismayed by reason of these great multitude, for the battle is not yours, but God's. Have not I commanded thee, Be strong and of good courage, be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee, wherever thou wouldst go. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Edom, even 4, I will not revoke my judgment, because he pursued his brother with the sword, and stifled all compassion. His anger raged continually, and his fury flamed increasingly. Their bows also shall dash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes shall not spare children. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils, and they will scourge you in their synagogues, and ye shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake, for a testimony against them and the Gentiles. Matthew 10. Okay, I just want to show you this here. This is the Renaissance building. This is on the Detroit side. This is the black building that you see. This is the tallest, of course, that you can see here on the Detroit side. And then going here, this is the casino. This is on the Canadian side. And it's white. And it has a funny shape to the top of the building. But again, it's white. So you've got your black buildings. You got your white. Okay. Right here. All right, just so there you go. There's the scene right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read this out, and then I'm going to continue. Oh, where did I put it? Oh, sorry, hold on 1 minute. And I'm just going to read this real quick. I've done it before, but I just, again, I need to read this. The great weight of the evidence before us to effect that the certain types of medical experiments of human beings, when kept within reasonable, well-defined bounds, conform to the ethics of the medical profession generally. The protagonists of the practice of human experiments justify their views on the basis that such experiments yield results for the good of society and that are unprocurable by other means or means of study. All agree, however, that the certain basic principles must be observed in order to satisfy moral, ethical, and legal concepts. The voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. This means that the person involved should have legal capacity to give consent, should be so situated to be able to exercise free power of choice without the intervention of any element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, overreaching, or other ulterior form of constraint or coercion, and should have sufficient knowledge and comprehension of the elements of the subject matter involved as to enable him to make an understanding and enlightened decision. This latter element requires that before the acceptance of the affirmation decision by the experimental subject, that there should be made known to him the nature, duration, and purpose of the experiment, the method, means by which it is to be conducted, all inconveniences, hazards, responsibility to be expected, and the effects upon his health or persons which may possibly come from the participant in the experiment. During the course of the experiment, the human subject should be at liberty to bring the experiment to an end if he has reached the physical or mental state where continuation of the experiment seems to him to be impossible. During the course of the experiment, the scientist in charge must be prepared to terminate the experiment at any stage. If he has probable cause to believe the experiment of the good faith, superior skill, and careful judgment requires of him, that a continuation of the experiment is likely to result in injury, disability, or death to the experimental subject. The Nuremberg Code, 1947, British Medical Journal. When the Nuremberg trials ended in October of 1946, 10 senior Nazi officials were hanged. An American journalist heard one of their ranks, Julius Skretcher, cried out with his last words, Porumfest. We should not forget that Amalek represents a spirit which has operated throughout history. Both Moses and Mordecai in the Scroll of Esther understood that prayer and fasting was needed, tools to combat the spirit of anti-Semitism. We need to be a people of action and visibly to show what side we're on. And I know that his commandment is life everlasting. Whatsoever I speak, therefore, even as the Father said unto me, so I speak. Thank you, Jesus.